Who wants to hear about the time my US work visa was revoked right before the Christmas holiday break? So back in 2017, I held TN status as a border commuter to work for a US employer under the profession of lawyer. I wasn't practicing law in this position, but the job itself did require a law degree because I was working within the legal profession. So right before the holiday break, I think it was the last or second to last day before we closed, I was crossing the US-Canada border during rush hour when the border officer started asking me questions about my job. I had one of those fancy internal job titles, not just lawyer, and hearing that gave the officer pause. He sent me to secondary inspection where I was grilled for hours, and I do mean hours, on every aspect of the job. Most of the questions they asked tied to the Occupational Outlook Handbook's definition of lawyer and the corresponding duties attached to it, which in truth is kind of an outdated notion of what the modern lawyer does. Regardless, the officer ultimately decided to revoke my TN status after keeping me in secondary for 4 hours. I distinctly remember hearing another CBP officer overhearing this exchange, laughing and saying, "Oh man, that sucks," which, yes, it did. My livelihood was literally at stake, and I did not need you to remind me of that. So I returned to Canada, called my boss, and we made a plan to adjust my status to a different visa that I qualified for, H-1B. I was allowed to work from Canada until my request for adjustment of status to H-1B was ready, and my employer paid to have it expedited, so it took about 6 weeks. I then proceeded to cross the border and was processed under this new visa. Luckily, everything went fine, and I ended up staying on H-1B for 3.5 years. All in all, this was a huge learning experience. Part of this was on me. I was crossing the border almost every day, and I let my guard down. Always remember that you are truly being inspected every time you cross the border, and you need to be careful with what you say, even if you have a visa. But second, my lawyer should have anticipated this, especially since I was a border commuter, and prepared a different application from the get-go. They chose to proceed with the TN because it was the quickest and easiest option, but they really should have gone with H-1B in the first place, since educational institutions aren't subject to the cap and lottery, and it was a suspect situation. So now that I'm practicing immigration law full-time, I always make sure that my clients get the best visa for their occupation and circumstance, and that they are prepared to know exactly what to expect when they cross the border. Contact CSU Legal with any of your immigration questions.